Hey, welcome to Feisty Chess. I've got white here playing a 10-5 game against Mohamed Omar 22. Looks like we have a French defense. I'm going to play a gambit that I've been playing against this occasionally, recently. We're going to try to get into a French wing gambit. So knight f3 already looks suspicious. We're planning on e5 and now challenging this c-pawn with b4. This is the French wing gambit. I have a hard time, actually, if opponents decline with c4. But okay, we're going to do the gambit accepted here. And the fun thing about this gambit is white, for the cost of a pawn, gets everything he wants in a French. He gets a strong bishop on d3. He gets to support his center on d4 with a pawn, like such. Well, the center on d4. So the center is really, really strong, but black's got an extra queenside pawn. Okay. So yeah, I think bishop d3 here. Okay. Okay, I think I'll castle. This pawn is protected here for the time being. So if I castle, knight takes pawn is no good because I take knight. Queen takes knight, and then bishop b5 check, and we win the queen. But after I castle, black will likely play bishop d7 because French players know this kind of thing. And at that point, I'll need to protect that pawn, I think. Or perhaps I can take on b4 at that point. Then knight takes b4. My bishop is funny, actually, on b3. So also the idea of c3 now, but then bishop takes pawn takes c3, knight takes c3, and then after bishop d7. Yeah, that means he doesn't have knight b5. He can't challenge my bishop on d3. In the spirit of the gambit, it seems right to just castle here. So probably bishop d7 is coming. I should be fine here. Yeah. Oh. Okay, this just drops a piece. Now, there's a knight c6 idea. Yeah, now it drops a queen. So it looks like he can block this check with knight c6, guarding the queen, but the knight's pinned and it's not really guarding the queen. Wow. This stuff doesn't happen in my blitz games. It's been happening in my rapid games. My opponent's just falling into some relatively common and straightforward traps. So he went right for the d-pawn. Okay, we'll have to look at the analysis about how the game might have gone. Okay, well, I'll give up a bishop unless I take with check here, and then I'll just have a queen for a minor piece. Not even for a minor piece, actually. So black resigns. Okay. Well, you get French players out of their book, good things can happen. So this strikes me because I'm going to pull the analysis. It's the first thing you learn in the French. When you start playing the French, you learn the advanced variation, right? I played the French for a long time, and I learned from Nimzovich's book, Chess Praxis, what you do against the advanced variation. Here's the main line. I did not play this, but this is the advanced variation. And then you play c5, and white wants to be able to recapture with a pawn, plays c3. And then here's one of the most common lines. You just keep adding pressure to d4. That's what black can do in the French. So let's say white defends. It's not needed defense just yet, but now black keeps adding pressure with this, and he'd like to get a knight around to add even more pressure, you can also go through this square. To get to f5, to add even more pressure to that. But here white can play bishop d3, and it looks like, oh, we've disrupted the connection of the queen to the d4 pawn. So take, white takes, and now black taking is a huge mistake. This looks exactly like it looked in the game. And this is one of the most common traps you have to learn if you're going to play the French as black. Same as the game here. I mean, you're just losing the queen. So that's why the main move here, before you take on d4, is bishop d7. And now there's no check. Now there's no check on b5, because that bishop will be there. So now black is threatening, and the most interesting way for white to play here is to gambit this pawn. This is called the what's it called? The Milner-Berry gambit. Yeah. And white actually gambits a second pawn, and this is kind of poison for black. But anyway, that's similar to what happened in the game. And maybe he knows that line in the advanced variation, but he wasn't ready for it here in a wild variation he's probably never seen before, this wing gambit. Took the first pawn, and probably here I play a3. He doesn't want to take the second pawn on the advice of many who would say that as black especially, take the first pawn, never take the second pawn. That's when you're in trouble. That definitely applies to the e5 pawn in the Milner-Berry gambit I just showed you. I'm not sure it really applies here. I actually know the Milner-Berry better than I know this particular gambit. So okay, he doesn't take on a3, which would be the logical move here. Say, okay, now I've got this passed outside a pawn protectable by this pawn. All right, these queenside pawns are, black has an obvious plan of attack of how he's going to win the game with his extra pawn. It's already backed up by a rook so far. So anyway, taking does make sense here. I think knight here also makes sense. I was expecting it to just transpose. Yeah, I could take here, and this would allow me to gain time. This is probably how I should have played this, because he has to, if he wants to stay a pawn up, he has to take here, and then I get c3, and this is a move I want to play anyway, and then I just has to go right back. So this lets him keep the pawn, but gets white a good lead in development, because this knight's going to have to move again. I wonder what the computer thinks of a position like this. Yeah, still advantage. Well, okay, it's even. White has compensation for the pawn. And usually in a position like this where computer says it's even, if it's even because one side has a pawn and one side has compensation, in human games I would count on the, especially at submaster level, I would count on the compensation a lot more than I count on the pawn. And we see that. We saw that last game I played. We see that here today too. Okay, I played bishop d3. Yeah, and now knight f5 is a recommendation. I was thinking bishop. Okay. So queen there. It still says a takes b4, and I thought maybe this is good. Any queen takes will be met by c3. Knight takes is better, and then I can just drop the bishop back. And I'll still gain some time on that knight, so I won't have lost a ton of time with that bishop. But I'm gonna spend 2 moves moving that bishop back and forth, just like he moved his knight back and forth. So still a little bit of advantage to black, but not bad. I just castled. I was expecting bishop d7, right? Because this is the move that any French player would know. You have to do that before you go for d4 here. And then I was thinking I might take here. Okay, we have interesting ideas here. Giving up a second pawn, but apparently that pawn is poison. Well, yeah, I like this. I mean, down 2 pawns, but that black king stuck in the center. And if he wants to castle queenside, I'd be happy to see that. But anyway, instead of that, kind of interesting stuff, we got this. And again, like I said, he can try to block with the knight, but it doesn't really protect the queen. It's pinned. So we're up a whole queen in both of these lines. and in the game, we just traded bishops, and then I'll pick up the queen later. So surprising for a high-rated player. Most people play the French, know it pretty well, and the French is a great opening to learn. I really recommend the French if you're looking for like your first opening to learn as black. You can even play e6 against d4, and often people will go into a French. But a lot of white players just hate playing against the French because black just gets lots of pressure on d4. There's really like one central idea with the French, and it's to break up white's fixed center here. And pressure on d4, you play f6 when it's safe to try to pressure e5, and you end up with the center pawns, right? It's kind of like the Sicilian in the sense that black's ultimately trying to trade off flank pawns for center pawns. He does it in a different way. He does it in a way that usually lets him get his pieces out and get castled quicker, in my opinion. And there's not as many effective gambits. I don't think there's any gambit against the French that is as good as the Mora against the Sicilian. Maybe that's just a matter of personal taste. But anyway, most French players, I think, would be more wise to this. So we kind of lucked out today. This classic kind of trap with the queen on d4 just hanging there. So anyway, more example of why you like to play feisty gambit openings. If we had played the advance, maybe he would have not fallen into that trap, because the Milner-Berry is a lot more common, just to go back to this. If we played the main move here, d4, and then played the advance, all these moves, and here black might recognize that he can't take that pawn because he knows the lines. Probably he wouldn't have done this here, because this is known in French, but it's a pattern that applies elsewhere too. So, all right. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay feisty.